There's a lot of products and services sold in the home industry, from interior designers to manufacturers and retailers. A kitchen is a kitchen at the end of the day. So, how do you market the home industry to the women making a majority of the purchasing decisions? Home industry marketing expert Ericka Saurit joins me today to talk about what works best in the home industry to help better differentiate products and services that otherwise might compete in the sea of sameness to a consumer. And Ericka walks us through her E3 storytelling framework. And this home industry example is a great one to listen to even if you're not in the home industry, because you may get some insights for how you can think about differentiating and talking about your products or services, because we all have competitors. Ericka Saurit is the founder of Saurit Creative, a boutique brand marketing agency with the mission to support and elevate brands across the entire home industry. As a global brand marketing leader, she has overseen digital product development and brand strategy at Airbnb in San Francisco, created immersive physical and virtual brand experiences, Tag Heuer, Estee Lauder, and Procter& Gamble, as well as top home and lifestyle brands around the world to develop award-winning brand messaging and engagement campaigns. Her background in interior design and marketing has made her really passionate about helping businesses transform into unforgettable brands. Welcome to Marketing with Empathy, the podcast for brands that want to target and engage moms. Why? Well, moms influence or control 85% of all household purchases, making them a lucrative market to figure out. Even if moms aren't your only audience, they're a critical one to figure out for so many brands. And if that's you, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Sarah Panus, and I have more than 20 years of experience helping and working with big brands to small brands, including Sleep Number, SheFit, American Express, LegalZoom, and more. So tune in here for ideas that'll get your products and services into the hands of more moms who need them. And thanks to your support, this podcast is in the top 5% of all podcasts and a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. Let's hear from today's sponsors and then jump right into my conversation with Ericka Saurit. Okay, Ericka, to dig in first, tell us more about the interior designers and the home industry clients that you serve, just to level set us.
So my educational background is in studio art and then in interior design. So I really had to learn how to not just show visually what we wanted to create, but write a story or create a presentation. And that's communication skills that I really enjoyed doing throughout my career. I think that's what really moved me into a marketing role. So after art school and after studying interior architecture, I worked for about 10 years around the world as a interior designer, doing mostly corporate exhibition experience centers. I worked for a firm that did a lot of institutional and cultural work. And so I sat sort of in between a role as an environmental graphic designer and a physical kind of experiential designer, designing spaces that told stories about history or science or corporations. And so again, that involved a lot of storytelling. After doing that for about 10 years, I was brought in to client meetings because I was really good at pitching on behalf of the design team and helping the marketing team sell the story to the client. And so that evolved into more and more marketing roles. I never looked back at the design kind of hands-on AutoCAD, that world, I happily left behind to move into a marketing role. I worked for large home furnishings brands in their marketing department, sort of as a facilitator between what the design world needed and what the business needed to sell products. I worked for Airbnb in San Francisco. I sat in between the design kind of environments design team and the marketing team, which was trying to educate hosts on how to up-level their homes to kind of bring more short-term rentals onto the platform. And about 2020, I decided to create my own business. As you know, the one magical thing that came out of all of us being in our homes during COVID was that the awareness for how interior designers and how your space, right, your home, your workplace, all the things that it was at that time, how important it is to have a home that makes you feel safe and healthy and facilitates learning for your children or your family. It facilitates happiness and comfort and safety. I since then started my own business serving specifically interior designers and home brands, and that is really any kind of manufacturer that makes products for the home: carpets, accessories, lighting, paint, furniture, anything you can think of that if you look around you is manufactured. Mostly my clients manufacture in the US, and then they either sell directly to interior designers as a like a B2B business, or they sell direct to the consumer. So I've worked on all kind of ends of the home industry, from the people who create the spaces, the interior designers, to the people who make the things for the spaces that we all inhabit.
It's such a great and interesting niche. I love the home industry. At one point in my career, I thought about staying in the home industry. I had started in fashion PR in New York, and then I
Mhm.
was getting exposed to more of the home industry in New York when I was there. I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York for one of my degrees, and I took a class with this home products expert, and that's what got me. And I was like, oh, this is so fascinating, because it's like the things we're around and that we use and we experience in a day to day, but it makes such a big difference from your element, and your clients know how to beautify them and actually how it all comes together. I'm curious from a home industry perspective, since you're the expert on that, and for everyone listening who doesn't have a clue about the home industry, maybe, are there any broad things about the home industry that we should all know about that could be good insights for us as we think about this discussion too?
So, from the point of view, from the trade side, so from an interior designer who's working, or an architect or a builder, anyone who's offering kind of design services for the home, the majority of the decision makers for our industry are women. Either women who are making decisions for their family, or for if they're in a couple, or if they're by themselves. And so they're making decisions about the home, even if they aren't the financial decision maker. They're making the decisions. They have a heavy hand on what aesthetic or what functional choices are made. And a lot of the interior designers that I work with they're men and women. They're small to medium sized firms, and so they are looking to find a way to stand out. There's a lot of interior designers now as a result of the boom in homemaking, which is great, but there's a lot of competition. And so they come to me to sort of help understand what is going to best make their brands stand out, rise above. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I focus on, my background is storytelling. How do we create kind of resonant marketing messages that don't necessarily specifically always appeal to women, but that will appeal to families, because a majority of the clients who are looking to do a renovation or a new home build or a single room renovation are doing that in homes with families. So a lot of my clients are families.
Mm. And then just a point of clarification too. So your clients as the interior designers, but then you also have brands that you represent. So you kind of play this role. From my perspective, you're like this bridge in the
Mhm.
home industry of you can work directly with those brands that are products inside of the home, or you have the interior designers and how their work. I like the two-pronged approach for sure. On the lens of storytelling, then, since you mentioned that, you've developed a specific method to create stories for the home industry that you found works really well. And you call it the E3 storytelling framework. I'm a big fan of frameworks. I'm a story
Great, me
brand guide,
too.
so we have our framework, of course. But I'm curious from the home industry perspective, like what have you found? Tell us more about your E3 storytelling framework.
Most of my life, I have been traveling. I traveled for graduate school. I went to Finland to study light and study museums there. I worked, like I said, as an interior designer all around the world. I worked in China. I was based in Beijing and Shanghai for about 7 years, and I got to do projects all around Asia. I traveled throughout my life for love, and I lived in Argentina for a while, and now I live in between France and North Carolina in a city called High Point, which is the home of home furnishings, which is also where I grew up. But I've traveled my whole life for a variety of reasons. And one of the things that I think about and I try to relate to people. It's when you go back through photos, you look on your phone, or if you're old enough to have albums of photos, the things that you remember most. You may remember a meal, you may remember a certain architecture or a certain place that you went to, but the things that really tie us to those memories are the experiences, the feeling, right? The feeling we had walking through a ruin or an archaeological site, the sense of being small or the sense of being like just a piece of something in a much greater, bigger world, right? That sense of wonder, that sense of discovery, that's a feeling, right? Travel awakens these things, I hope in other people as well, I'm sure. But I wanted to start the story by saying it's really not always about the objects, right? The places. It's about the feelings that they evoke in us. And becoming like working as a business, you have one trajectory to make money, right? The primary function of a business. But when you start to think about yourself as a brand, you start to think that your brand can represent a much greater set of emotions and feelings in the hearts and minds of the people that you serve. And so I speak to service providers who provide creative services like design or architecture or building, as well as to people who make things, manufacturers who sell products or objects, right? And so we all have reasons to buy these products or services. And depending on the cost of those things, we can see that there's a much longer decision making pathway. A runway to make a decision can be very short for something like toothpaste or diapers. You can make a decision based on a memory, right, of a brand that you know before, you've used before, or you can make something, that has a really low risk, right? But when you're making a decision about your home, it can be quite expensive. It can displace your family. If it takes several months, you may have to move in and out. So the client who's making this decision to invest in interior design services or even home building services, or even to buy a more expensive product like a sofa or an expensive rug or the parts and pieces of the design, right? That decision making path is much longer. You have to get, as a marketer, you have to get in front of those clients and tell stories that create more of an emotion, that create a story around a feeling. And so I'm trying to get to the idea with clients that even if you have a beautiful portfolio, even if you're selling really high-end furniture or you're selling something that is really well made, it's really beautiful, we don't start with the images. We don't speak to each other there's not photos flying out of my mouth to describe Angkor Wat or Paris or whatever. I'm talking about like how I felt there, what I remembered about it, how it transformed me in a way. And those are the kind of stories that we try to get designers and home brands to think about in their marketing more and more than just putting picture of a sofa or a picture of a beautiful kitchen in front of someone, because we don't really necessarily always understand or calibrate on the same story together. So the E3 storytelling framework is a way I have created to help brands really think about a strategy for telling a story, but also a strategy for creating an entire marketing plan. So do you want to hear it?
Yes, lay it on us.
Okay. Each of these begin with the letter E.
Okay.
I'm Erica. I like for people to remember that by the letter E. So the first one is defining what it is that makes you extraordinary. This is your differentiator. This is pretty common in marketing to really key into that one thing or many things, if you're lucky, that make you different than anyone else. And when I start working with clients, we'll go through not just education and the size of their team, their products, how they manufacture, how they work. All of those things can be differentiated, can be factors that make their business, their brand different. But I also go into how are you working in your community? What languages do you speak? Did you grow up in a different place? Like, how do all of these factors of your life come into the work that you create? Because the second E is emotional resonance. So they build on each other. So the first one is we define what makes you extraordinary? How are you different? And I do literally create lists with clients where we'll make an entire list of everything, services they make, products they make, and then start to get more granular. And those lists can be very long, but I sit them next to, I say, okay, let's look at two or three of your benchmark brands or benchmark clients. Who else is going to be in comparison with you when your client is thinking about your business, choosing you as a service provider or choosing you to shop from you with a product? And we go through and we say, okay, what are they creating? What are their common differentiators are? And you can mark through the ones that are similar until you're left with what completely makes you extraordinary and different. And once we start to see that, it's not that we lead the messaging with those things that make you extraordinary, but we do make sure that they're part of a larger message, because what we find is that in the second E, that emotional resonance, that's the thing that the clients are really going to care about. That's the feeling they're going to lean into. That's what's going to make them remember you, coupled with the differentiator or the thing that makes you extraordinary. When I talk about that emotional decision making journey, whether it takes 15 minutes at the grocery store to select a soup brand, or it takes 6 months to go back and forth with an interior designer to make a decision on whether or not to work with them or whether or not to go with the full scope of the home renovation. The stories that designers and home brands can really lean into are based around 5 kind of core human emotions that we'll begin to use to build stories. And so the first one is a sense of belonging. This is really common for families that come to an interior designer. Let's say they have children who are growing up and maybe moving into high school, and eventually they're going to kind of move out of the home to be on their own. Parents want to create a space where the children will want to come back to, right? They don't just need a renovation of their living room or their kitchen to make it bigger. The core emotional motivation where we start to build stories around is the sense that you're creating a space where they will always feel like they belong. And that's a lot different than showing images of a kitchen. When you show images of a kitchen, you show the outcome, you show the product. You don't necessarily show the emotion, right? You're not necessarily selling what transformation is going to be brought about when you deliver the project. And that's what most people really care about, right? And we know this from Story Brand, is that we're selling, there's a saying, you don't just sell the steak, you sell the sizzle. You sell all the
Yeah,
parts around. I love that. And once
I do
you
too.
explain it that way, a lot of clients start to get it. But so that sense of belonging is a great way when I interview clients and we're working together trying to figure out what that differentiator, that extraordinary piece is. Then we go into, okay, tell me a little bit about your clients. Who are they? Are they young professionals? Are they families? Are they, how old are their children? Who are they and what do they really care about? What are they telling you when they come to you? So one of those, like I said, is that sense of belonging. The second one is to be seen and heard. This is super common. And I see this a lot with clients who work with young professionals or people who are just starting to build their first home, or they have an apartment and they want to work with a designer to refresh the space or renovate. They're interested in having friends over. They want to entertain. They want their neighbors to come over and see their success. They want to be seen and heard for who they are and who they're becoming. It's not just young professionals, but this is a great example that when a client describes to me a little bit about who they serve, might be some questions I can kind of lead into to get to see if this is one of the core emotions we can start building stories around. The third and the fourth one I see together a lot. The third one is that our life has purpose and meaning, right? That feeling that we have the ability to create things for other people just because we can. We want to leave a legacy. And the fourth one is hope for the future. So This kind of client is wanting to build something that might stay in the family for a long time. They might be wanting to build a second home or a vacation home, or they might be wanting to renovate, a cabin or something like that will stay in the family. That space becomes a place that really becomes a family member, right? It becomes part of the folklore of the family. And so they are doing it because they can and they want to give back and they want to leave a legacy, or they want to kind of build something for their family, right? So when we realize that might be part of the core motivation behind why the client is coming to the designer or the builder, that's again the place where we start building stories. And so the last one is the idea that we wander or we wonder, right? Wander with an A and wonder with an O. And I like this one, especially for product brands. And you'll see this actually if you pay attention to ads you see online or in magazines. There's this sort of wow discovery copy, or there's this like magical kind of imagery that hints to the idea of discovery or of enchantment, right? Or of mystery. That is really keying into our wonder core emotion. And there's a beautiful place to build stories from. Really enjoy when we discover that might be what it is. And in the storytelling, they just give us this sort of catalyst to start to build visual stories and build stories with copy and with text. And it's a lot of fun. So that's the second E, that emotional resonance, really understanding what it is that's driving that decision making with your clients or your customers, because that's the story you want to talk to them about. That's the transformation that you're trying to sell. And then the third E, like I said, these are sequential. The third E is experiential touch points. So then how do we deploy this story across all of the client or customer journey? It's really mapping what, from the moment they first hear about you, what does that message look like for when they book a discovery call, or when they add to cart, whatever that journey looks like. Are we creating on brand, on message touch points with that client to remind them of that sizzle, not just the steak? So those are the three E's. And that's the strategy that we use with clients. That's the strategy I teach also I have a marketing school specifically for creatives. So that's for creative service providers who are either running their own firm and never got a marketing background or education, or really just love marketing and want to learn more. Or it's also for people who are like me, who transitioned, who are really creative and could make really beautiful things graphically or with copy, or with imagery, but didn't really understand how marketing worked enough to be able to have successful strategy. So I teach this in my marketing school, and we go much deeper into how to, especially on the experiential touch points, how to activate a marketing plan, like a marketing funnel, once you have a story created.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the fun part for me. This is the part that I'm sure most people have this sort of aha moment, where once they get that framework and that system, like you said, I love a good framework. So do I.
Yeah.
Once they get that, then the rest is really about creativity and activating specific to their business.
Got it. Okay. So E3, extraordinary emotional resonance and experiential touch points.
Yeah.
It helps you get to that sizzle, not just the steak. Like you said, I'm going to use that line. I love that line. I'm curious then beyond that, or
Mhm.
including that, however you want to answer this, but as other brands are listening right now and they're trying to figure out how they get their products or services into the hands of more moms, more women who need their products and services, what advice do you have for those brands as they're trying to do that?
So, my advice is speak again about the transformation. Get to really understand the ideology behind what your clients really are looking for. Do you know who Marcus Collins is? Have you read
Mm,
anything by him?
no, I don't think so.
Oof. Okay, hot tip.
Tell me
He's
more.
amazing.
Okay.
Marcus Collins, he's an educator as well as a brand strategist. He wrote a book. It's one of my favorites. It's called For the Culture. I think it came out a couple years ago. It's not that old, but what
Okay.
he says, and I've not heard this explained in such a way that really made sense to me. He talks a lot about the idea that your ideal or perfect fit client, that person isn't just a demographic. It's not just 26 to 32, male, female, mom, not mom. We aren't just this demographic. What we are, if you want to think about it in the analogy of a congregation, right? Let's say whether or not you are religious and you go to church, you can understand that when you are perhaps in a congregation, the people around you may be all colors, all ages, all shapes, all backgrounds, all cultures. But one thing that unites you is what you believe, right? You have
Mhm.
this ideology that you all believe in. So trying to figure out that your clients or your customers should fit into this one demographic boundary really limits you from understanding that people who care about the same thing look and live in all different ways. So that thinking about how to define the ideology of your brand and finding people who believe the same thing is it opens you up in a lot of interesting ways to think about how to reach moms. What do they care about? What are their ideologies with in your specific business or service offering? Really do lots of interviews. Our business really changed when we began doing a lot of client interviews. Our clients gave us access to their clients, and we were able to really dig into their decision, like what they cared about. And it was
Mhm.
surprising. So, my advice is if you're a brand and you don't have a way to make a survey of your clients or your customers or your potential customers, that might be a very first place to start. Ask them what they really care about. Ask them what motivates them. Ask them what, they're really looking for. And if you don't know how to do that yourself, work with a research partner who can help you so that you really gather that data to be able to build better stories that resonate with your clients.
Yeah, I second that 100% because from a storytelling perspective, to actually really truly connect, we need to know those next layers deeper, as you've just explained. You can't
Right.
just say, oh, well, we want to reach moms that are 35 to 44, or we want to reach first time moms. Okay, great. Well, then that's starting to get a little bit like you're a first time mom. Well, then how does that feel? What do they believe? Like, what are they struggling
Right.
with? What are all those things that you can talk to a first time mom about specifically, if that's the example? Versus, and especially in the mom category, there's a lot of different life stages that as moms we go through, from trying to conceive to being the first time to having multiples to empty nesting to
Right.
all the ranges in between, the teen years, like whatever it is. There's the sandwich generation of after your kids are gone, then maybe you're taking care of your aging parents. There's just a lot of different ranges. And it's good to know where you fit and where you want to fit within that life journey. And as you mentioned, like what's their beliefs and kind of ideologies and things that they're going through that your product or service can really help them with, because that's what's going to help you better connect with them. So
And
I
I would
love that.
say too, this experience we all had as moms, as professionals, as marketers is very radically different than what was happening just 6 years ago. Right.
Mhm.
So the feelings and thinking, I would say if you're a brand and you're like, oh, we did that research, we've done it before, check that it's relative and recent to how we experience this world today. And if it's less than 5 years old, it's probably relevant. But if it's older than that, I assume that it's not. Check in and make sure that you have updated research and that
Yeah.
it reflects the ideologies of the present day.
100%. Okay, so then any client examples or brands that you see out there that do a really good job of this, that are everything how you've described? I'm curious from your lens in the home
Yeah.
industry of who is doing a great job of connecting well with their customers.
I'll tee this up with just a couple and then I'm going to go deeper into one. So, just to get a sense of what an ideology looks like, right? So, we all know Apple think different, right?
Mhm.
It's not buy a computer, or buy a phone, right? Apple sells whatever they want because they're asking you to think creatively or feel like a creative, right? That resonates with me because I feel like I'm a creative too. Nike, just do it, right? Anybody can be an athlete. That is an ideology that allows them to sell sneakers and headbands and t-shirts and all this stuff, right? Home Depot, how doers get more done. It's part of their tagline, but it really is about empowerment more than chainsaws and garbage bags and plywood. Chewy, if you have pets, no one pet parents alone. There's a sense of belonging and community already inherent in that. Marie Kondo is the one I want to double into because she is not an interior designer, but she's heavily influential in the home space. Do you know who
Mhm.
she is?
Yeah, she's the master organizer, and she's the one of let it go like it's giving you joy and say goodbye to it. I've done
Yes.
that before in my house where I'm like, "Goodbye, you've done me well. Now you can do someone
You're
else
not
well, or I'm
sparking
throwing you
joy.
away."
If you want, I can talk real quick about her E3
Yeah,
framework
please. Do
because
it.
I use her as an example again for interior designers because it's like she's not an interior designer, but she is able to leverage an ideology about space that a lot of designers can find commonality in. Okay, her first E, the thing that makes her extraordinary is she grew up in Japan. She grew up really close to her grandmother, who showed her that living with just a few things in a small space, having things that meant something was better than they weren't wealthy, they didn't have a lot, but what they had, she really treasured. And so she showed her that as a way of living. And in Japan, around the time she was emerging into her first career, there were a lot of people in the organizational consultant space. Japan is, especially in the cities, highly dense. The spaces are very small. And so the idea of the organizational consultant is that they come in and they tell you how to maximize your space. And what she saw was that a majority of the organizational consultants were telling people to just throw stuff out. If it doesn't work, toss it. You don't need it. You'll have more space. Just get rid of all of it and start over. And she was like, well, wait a second. I don't believe that. I believe the things you have should spark joy. And if they don't, it's time to let them go. So there is a sort of extraordinary point of view that makes her different. That was her differentiator. It was like she had a different point of view. But how she started to weave a message around it, that second E, that emotional resonance, was because she was able to say home care, organization itself is an act of self care. And that was where a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, like I get it. I can believe the same thing too. I understand that ideology as well. So the idea of organizing to be not just about baskets and boxes and rolled up socks, but it's about giving yourself the space in your own home to live the way you want. There's a freedom there. And so that's a pretty powerful message, right? And it freed her up to sell courses and books and TV shows and talk people through and build a culture, build a congregation of people who believed the same thing. And now she's not just limited to selling books or courses or speeches. She now is training people on this method. And this is where that third E comes in, that experiential touch point is she's got product collaborations with brands. She's creating all her own many things. And all of this because of this one kind of ideology she was able to leverage that's not about luxury, it's not about style. And this is something that within the design industry, you'll know this from fashion too, you can't differentiate on the idea that you make a luxury product. You can't differentiate on the style of your whatever. Your point of view is not a differentiator. What's going to help you differentiate is what you believe. And that will also free you to do not just like in fashion, you can do clothes and shoes and accessories and cosmetics, but in the home industry, you don't just have to design spaces. You can write books and you can create products and you can have a much broader and bigger line of business when you don't tie it to just one style or one specific point of view. I see this a lot, and I think probably in every industry it's the same, but the messages are so generic and non-specific, and they don't speak again to us. They talk about personalized service, they talk about quality you can count on, they talk about someone who's always going to advocate on your behalf. And those are the same messages we hear from our bank, or if we go to buy chicken or whatever is being sold to us, they all have the same message. So make it different, make it spark joy. I think if The last time I checked, Recondo even has a kind of a pop-up on her website that says, "Get emails that spark joy."
Smart.
She's applying this across the
Everything.
whole spectrum.
Yeah, smart. Great
Yeah,
example. Thank you for
yeah,
illustrating that. It's helpful to put it into context of a brand that probably many of us are familiar with Marie
yep.
Kondo. And if you're not, hey, you got introduced to her.
Go
Go check her out. I think there may still be on Netflix showing her going into people's homes and her process, which is how
Mhm.
I first watched her and knew more about her. Okay, then as we wrap up, tell us all about how people can connect with you online. I would love to hear, give us the details on that course you had mentioned, the
Yeah.
marketing school for creatives as well, for whether they're the brand or they're running their own business. But I think your perspective is really interesting.
I feel one of the missions of my, business is to educate. I did teach for a short period of time in my career. I taught design at the university level. I taught foundational interior designers and architects, and then I taught a graduate level where I felt like sharing and teaching and guiding people is really something I've just been called to do in this life. And marketing school came about a couple of years ago. I kept saying the same things again and again in presentations, in client work. And I had actually younger people following a similar career path putting coffee meetings on my schedule to talk to me about how I learned marketing. They were creatives just like me. They had been led into creative roles. They were working as social media managers, they were working as creative directors, but they didn't understand the fundamental of marketing. They didn't understand how to make their really beautiful, gorgeous things work better and work more strategically. And they weren't finding that they were getting like a bigger seat at the table because they were missing some of that strategy. So I create marketing school for creatives and I go through a core curriculum. We go through how to create a narrative. I go through the E3 storytelling framework. We go through how to build a visual story off of that narrative story. I bridge then and teach the marketing funnel. Like, how do you then map that story to a strategy and build a marketing universe around it? And then we meet monthly for workshops, more tactical things. And then every year in January, I call it Marketing School for Creatives Live. I bring together everybody I know in the industry and we do 4 weeks of workshops and seminars. And this year we're doing ones on a lot of AI, really like more timely marketing topics that are more tactical. SEO, how to use Pinterest, how to use TikTok, how to approach brands, how to create presentations, all the things. So Marketing School for Creatives is open year round. It's marketingschoolforcreatives.com. I feel really transparent. I ask people to reach out to me directly all the time. So if you want to get on my website and book a time to have a chat about your career or about your work, if you want to work together, if you're in the home industry or if you are a brand that needs consulting, I do a lot of marketing consulting for teams when it comes to story building and story strategy, which I
And what's your website?
yeah. Saurit Creative, Saurit creative.com.
Perfect. And are there any social channels that you're particularly active in?
LinkedIn and same handle, Saurit Creative on Instagram, Marketing School for Creatives on Instagram, and then Ericka, Ericka, Saurit on LinkedIn.
Awesome. I'll make sure I drop all those links into the show
Yeah.
notes, folks, so you guys can click through easily. And I think the big piece, everyone listening, is if you're listening right now and you're not in the home industry or you're not in the interior design space, that's okay. Like, we can all learn from each other's and the different industries, because the insights that she just shared about that emotional connection with the audience and how that happens through your story, that will apply to all brands and industries,
Many.
really.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I hope this sparks some ideas for you guys listening. And until next week, God bless.